House Bill 71, in a very broad sense, the Ways and Means Committee minutes are all about ensuring that there is accountability for the newly created board and its handling of these students. Let me just take a step back and just describe what the bill does initially as it came in. We're secondary on HB 71. It came in from the House Judiciary Committee to us with one amendment. The bill creates a school board within Department of Juvenile Services. It's independent, also creates a superintendent for DJS, and it removes all of the education responsibilities of MSDE for DJS students back to DJS. And it also adds some additional requirements like providing additional staffing for the superintendent and a bunch of other pieces too. But let me just speak to the amendments from the Ways and Means Committee. Specifically, the Juvenile Services Education Board is made an independent unit within DJS. The appointed members of the Juvenile Services Education Board would have to the extent practicable, reflect the diversity of the population of the DJS students. The Juvenile Services Education Program superintendent must meet the same qualification criteria as a state superintendent, including our newly adopted standard that we passed this session. The superintendent, not DJS, is responsible for administering educational programs. That's an amendment that we added. Additionally, expert review teams established under the blueprint from Maryland bill expert review teams by the end of 2025-2026 school year have visited all residential facilities in which the juveniles are educated. DJS must notify a juvenile in its custody of the juvenile's educational rights. Content of the superintendent's annual report is specified and must be disaggregated by the student demographic characteristics. The Office of Legislative Audits will conduct audits at the board's 5-year and 8-year mark after it's fully implemented and online. DJS is required to contract with a private entity by January 1 of 2024 for a comprehensive evaluation of education policies and practices and recommendations within DJS. So to be able to set a floor of what's currently happening with the students currently in DJS. The contracted entity must report its findings by October 2026. And finally, the act is effective only for a period of 12 years before being abrogated. And those are the amendments, Madam Chair.
Did you move the amendments?
I move the amendments.
Second.
Any questions on the amendments? All right, all those in favor of the amendments?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And on the bill as amended?
Move favorable.
Second.
Comes Delegate Boatler. All right, any questions? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, House Bill 83, Delegate Washington.
All right, I'm on my computer. What time is it?
That wasn't me, Madam Chair.
I realize that. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 83, I'm gonna turn it over to Alistair to explain what the bill does in amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. House Bill 83, as it came into us, required that the State Department of Education adopt safety guidelines for the use of electric room partitions and required some specific things to go into those safety guidelines. We amended the bill to, rather than do that, require MSDE to do a thorough study of the current equipment used for electric room partitions, how they're used, and to adopt any necessary regulations or guidance to change their use and to report back to the General Assembly and the Governor within a 1.5 years.
Okay, any questions? Amendments, Delegate?
Yeah, I move the amendments, sorry.
Second.
Any questions? All right, all those in favor of the amendments?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And on the bill,
I move the bill as amended.
Second.
moved and seconded. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Delegate Wilkins, House Bill 222? I think it came.
Thank you, Madam
Sherry?
Chair. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 222 is the Value My Vote Act, which this committee passed out favorable as amended, I believe, last week. We are primary on the bill and judiciary is secondary. They did make some minor changes to the bill, and so I'm requesting that our committee concur with their changes. I'm going to review those amendments now. And again, all of these were with conversations with Department of Corrections and Judiciary utilizing their expertise. Again, as you know, Value My Vote Act creates a specific process to ensure the right to vote for incarcerated individuals who are eligible to vote. So the first amendment eliminates the requirement that an employee has to be provided training. Instead, an employee will be a point of contact with the State Board of Elections, and that's one of the amendments there. The second one eliminates the requirement that DPSCS, Department of Corrections, works with nonpartisan community organizations, and instead the State Board would do this. It also makes a technical change to make sure that we're also referencing local correctional facilities and not just the state correctional facilities. So I would like to move these amendments and concur with judiciary.
Second.
The amendments have been moved and seconded. Are there any questions? All right, all those in favor of the amendments?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And on the bill as amended, Delegate?
Move favorable.
Second.
Any question on the bill as newly amended? All right, thank you. All those in favor of 222 as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Party line? Just checking for anything else. Okay, thank you. House Bill 522, Delegate Washington?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As House Bill 522, as it came in, prohibited a school official from directing a school resource officer to enforce discipline-related violations of school policy. And also,
Hey, Corey.
You're not muted.
There she
It
is.
also-
Okay, muted.
it also prohibited an SRO from unilaterally enforcing discipline matters, adding to an SRO's training information on prohibited actions. We took a significant amount of amendments yesterday, Madam Chair, and I'm asked Alistair to walk us through just so that we're all aware of what the bill does in its entirety now.
Sure. So the bill as amended requires that school resource officers and school security employees be trained in best practices and certain prohibited behavior. It requires that prior to assignment for an SRO, a school resource officer must have a disciplinary record free of any administrative findings that would involve the use of excessive force. It requires that when school resource officers are assigned, in all counties except for Baltimore City, the school system and the local law enforcement agency work together to assign those school resource officers. It also requires the beginning in 2022, a behavioral safety and action plan be adopted in each school before a school security officer may be assigned there, or a school security employee may be employed there. Some requirements that are placed on school security, school resource officers include prohibition against enforcing the student code of conduct unless it's necessary to prevent serious bodily harm or if there's an imminent threat of serious bodily harm as defined under the Code of Maryland regulations.
The bells are ringing, so we can wrap it up in the next minute.
Yes, there's some additional reporting requirements and some money for the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center to study issues surrounding juvenile justice and the school to prison pipeline, and a required behavioral health and safety action plan that each school that has a school resource officer or school security employee must implement.
Move the amendments.
Second.
Moved by the vice chair, seconded by Delegate Shoemaker. Questions, Delegate Wilkins?
Yes, thank you for this and the work of the committee around these important changes. I know we're trying to get out of here, but I just want to understand this. Under the bill, can SROs still arrest students under this?
SRO still can arrest. We can't remove the arrest powers of police officers.
Okay, and then
It does,
what is
however, Delegate, it does remove the arrest powers of school security personnel. That we have those in Prince George's County.
Okay, and in terms of the $10 million that is used to help support jurisdictions in terms of school resource officers, can you say, I think you might have said something, is there anything regarding that in the bill?
Yes, so the money now will go to a local school system for them to decide if they want to use the funding for behavioral health services or developing community schools, or if they want to use it for SROs or security personnel.
Is it still a fund that they apply to, or you're saying they just get the money automatically?
They get the money automatically as it's currently constructed. We haven't changed that. That's already been happening. So the money goes out directly to the local law enforcement agencies or the school system. In this case, it'll go directly to the school system to decide.
And it's based on the proportion of schools out of the total of schools, which is current law.
And I'm going to move to Delegate Buckles' question. I did inform the Speaker's office that we need 10 more minutes. So go ahead, Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So do I understand that correctly then? So that each county school system, won't be done by just the principal in a school or a particular district. If you've got district, each county school system will have the ability to make an election of, hey, we were supposed to get $400,000 under the formula, just making up the number. We can choose to use that to hire more school counselors, psychologists, behavioral support, or we can use it to keep or invest in school resource officers. That won't be mandated by the state. Caroline County may choose to do one thing, Montgomery County may choose to do another. Is that a fair summation of where that point is?
That's correct, Delegate.
Okay, thanks, Al.
Any other questions on the amendments? All right, all those in favor of the amendments?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And on the bill as amended, Delegate Washington?
I move favorable, Madam Chair.
Second.
Questions, Delegate Hartman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I expressed my concern with the chair of the committee. There's a part of the bill that works on allegations. My sheriff's interpretation, if there's an allegation of excessive force used by an SRO, and it can simply be fixed by if after a preliminary investigation, there's proof of excess force. Right now, allegation while being investigated, the SRO could be removed. And again, a lot this year has evolved around allegations. And I think it's a pretty serious situation where there should be a preliminary investigation. If excessive force is used or is found in the preliminary investigation, then that SRO could be removed.
I thought the sheriffs were for this amended version. Or was that an earlier version?
The Sheriff's Association may, however, this individual sheriff reading it closer still has heartburn with the language. It's more or less if you're being investigated. So an allegation would lead to an investigation. During that investigation, that SRO would be removed. And what we're asking for is after a preliminary investigation, if excessive force is determined to be used, then that person can be removed immediately while further actions are being taken.
Yeah, Delegate, I think what we're getting at here is that, I think you and I talked about this, and so thank you for.
We did.
Thank you for hitting me up about it. I think what we're trying to get at here is that if there's use of force, excessive use of force as defined by the local and current law as defined by, most times is defined locally, then that officer will be reassigned until the end of that investigation is done. And if it's found that that person has not used excessive force. And excessive force, we're talking about something that's really high. I mean, there's a high threshold for excessive force. In that case, that officer should not be in our schools at the time, even if it is a assumption, or I guess you say allegation. So I'm gonna fight back a little bit on this because, if they're under investigation, we're temporarily removing them. If they aren't found to have been used excessive force, then they can come back to the school. But the excessive force piece is really important to have here. And it's temporary removal or reassignment. It's not permanent, Delegate.
I agree, but still, it's only an allegation at that point, even though an investigation. I'd just like to see after a preliminary investigation. Preliminary investigation, would resolve the whole thing. Once it's credible, and I think you admitted in your own explanation just there, even if it is an allegation or accusation or whatever, I just think there needs to be a quick preliminary investigation. If that shows that there was even, the thought of potential use of force, then it can go to the next level and that person be removed at that time.
Are you debating or asking a question?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Were you debating or are you asking a question?
I'm just offering the fix to eliminate the heartburn. Whereas once we know that the allegation of use of force or excessive use of force is verified, then it's okay to remove that person. I mean, being removed is a big deal. I mean, that's and it's being removed on an allegation.
Delegate Washington?
I think I've stated my point, Madam Chair, on this one. I think I understand the gentleman's point, but we're talking about the use of excessive force, which is a high threshold. And if it's found that there's an investigation that's occurring, then that person should be reassigned until the investigation is completed. We're talking about a very high bar of excessive force here. We're not talking about something small here. This is very serious that we have to take into account, and that person should be removed or reassigned from the school.
All right, Delegate Lasanti?
Thank you. Chair Washington, thank you very much for the work that you've done, you and the committee on this bill. Just have a couple of questions. Not being on the subcommittee, I'm just trying to absorb all of these amendments pretty quickly. What type of data collection do you is prescribed in these amendments? What are we going to be collecting?
Alistair, go ahead.
Sure. So currently there's a collection of data on uses of excessive force. We are also going to be collecting times that a school resource officer detained or searched a student. Additionally, there's going to be a collection of data on the ratio of school resource officers to various students and personnel within a school, and a report by the Maryland Center of School Safety, research into best practices and a report on best practices, and a accompanying training on best practices going forward.
So is there any data collection on the good things that SROs do? One of the things that came out in the hearing, I know a lot of the law enforcement community that testified said that we don't have a mechanism to collect those other things. Is that built into the bill?
Mm-hmm. In the collection of best practices information, that is among the things that are collected. So the idea there is to get at the good things that school resource officers and school security employees are doing in schools, and to get at the bad things and to diminish the bad things. And
sure, because the hope is that we learn from each other, right?
And that's why we put the language. That's why we put the language in there, Delegate, about the best practice. And how to
I appreciate that.
The censor will be able to do that.
And the
Okay.
other question I had is about the behavioral health safety plan. That is at the individual school level, correct?
School-based plan, correct.
A school-based, excuse me. Is there any specifics about what that would include? That's a pretty broad topic. The costs will be to individual schools for that?
There won't be any cost to individual schools for that, delegate. I mean, what we're asking for, many schools are come up with a community schools plan. As community schools, what we're saying is that you want to come up, we want them to develop a behavioral health and safety plan. If you're going to have an SRO, you should be able to make sure that there's a plan of what's happening in that school and how you're keeping the school safe and what are the roles of the SROs or school security personnel. And additionally, you should be able to make sure that, you know, we should create more restorative practices and make sure that we're tracking that information and how to use restorative practices when a student gets in trouble or, you know, things like that. So it wouldn't cost any additional work. We're also in there, if you see the reprint, it also talks about the LEA, the county board developing a template for the locals, for the schools to be able to use.
All right, let's,
Okay, yeah.
I mean.
We're saying the same thing. I just am concerned that they may not understand what that means, because I think a lot of them already have those in place, but just, you know, I'll talk to you offline. Thank you.
Excellent, please do so. I want to make sure you two connect in the first half hour session. Delegate Lutke?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the subcommittee's work. I think this is, you know, the right direction. I do have one question. So there's some sections in here that require new reporting of data and analysis of data. And my understanding is that one of the challenges that the Longitudinal Data System Center and other entities within state government have had in doing that analysis is that the State Department of Education consistently drags its feet in sharing any of the data necessary to do these types of analyses. So is there anything in the bill that would mandate MSDE to actually do their job?
Specifically members of educational members of the governing board of MLDS abstained from collecting this data when it was presented to them last fall. There is a requirement now that part of MLDS's mandate is that they collect this data and do research on it, and there's funding specifically tied to the collection of data and the research of that. So I don't know that we can mandate MSDE to share it any more than they already are required to, but under the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center originating statute. But I think that that will hopefully get at the issue and make sure that the data is collected and the research is done.
I appreciate that. I just, you know, I think, you know, we should talk to appropriations next year if they're continuing to drag their feet about budget language and doing what we can to hold them accountable. So thanks for your work on this.
All right, thank you. Delegate Long.
Question, I heard that if a police officer has a excessive force on his record, they cannot be used as a SRO officer. Is that even if it's an investigation, or do they have to be convicted of that?
Let me just say this. You have to be reassigned.
No. I'm
No,
talking about.
You're not answering the right question, Delegate Washington. I think he's
Thank
talking.
you, thank you, Madam Chair.
Becoming an SRO.
Correct.
Become an SRO later is what he's asking.
Yes.
Delegate Long, can you repeat your question for me? Just
Yes. If you're not an SRO officer and you're going to become an SOR officer, and you have a ding on your record that you were investigated for excessive force, will they be allowed to become an SOR officer?
Yes, you will be. If you have to be found that you use excessive force, delegate.
Not just accused.
Not just accused
Okay.
or an
All right,
investigation.
good. Thanks.
You got it.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Have we passed the amendments?
We passed the amendments and we already moved the bill and seconded it.
Moved the bill and seconded. If there's no other questions, all those in favor of 522?
Aye.
Any opposed? Party line minus Hornberger plus Lasanti. We are voting again after session. We're going to skip 1307 right now. The floor already waited 10 minutes for us as promised, and it's been a little longer than that. So everyone get to the floor. They are waiting for us to get there. We'll take up 1307 and other bills this afternoon. Okay.
We had a question, or what about election law?
They have one bill, I think. So emails will go out. We just all have to get going to session now.
Okay.
Stay tuned. There will be election law, I think, on one bill.